Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to turn you back up here. How are you doing this
Yeah,
morning?
I'm doing well, thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I think I'm making a habit of forgetting to turn the guest mic on. I apologize for that. But I'm so glad that you were able to take some time out and chat with us this morning. You are a very busy musician in this part of the world, and for good reason. Super talented. We had the pleasure of booking you with the jazz band Third Wind at the Silver Dollar Saloon back in April of this year. And let me tell you, it's still, or I'm sorry, not this year. That would have been last year already. My
Right.
goodness.
Yeah.
But out of all the shows that we put on last year, that one still is a highlight of last year's roster. But jazz isn't necessarily what you play all the time. For folks that haven't heard you, don't necessarily know, how best do you describe your, for lack of a better word, music persona?
Oh, interesting. Well, it's ever changing, uh, chameleon-like, so to speak. I started playing punk rock and rock and roll, Led Zeppelin covers, stuff like that, and then kind of moved into the blues and jazz territory. And I studied jazz guitar, and so I still love to play that music whenever I can. I was just at the Lakely in Eau Claire last week, but I'm in a lot of classic rock cover bands. I'm in more of an acoustic bluegrass band, and and I also do a lot of duo and solo work. So I guess the solo work maybe is most personal to me and my voice is really mellow, a lot of jazz standards and kind of old Beatles, Ray Charles, Bill Withers, stuff like that. And um, yeah, I don't know. I think they all kind of represent me, but that one's maybe the most personal, and I play some of my originals with that configuration too.
I want to talk a little bit about your originals too, but it sounds like you pull a lot of inspiration from maybe not necessarily soul music in its purest form, but kind of a more soulful music of a variety of genres. Is that
Yeah, absolutely. Rhythm and blues music. Absolutely. I think that's kind of the genesis for all the music I play, whether it's the classic rock stuff or more contemporary stuff. Um, Definitely.
you had mentioned at the beginning of there that when you first started out that kind of punk rock was a little bit of an influence. So you start from punk and end up this multi-genre musician. So how did that progression start? I assume that punk was kind of adolescent years and kind of first getting to know music. Am I wrong in that?
No, no, you're absolutely correct. And what's funny is I still listen to a lot of that music. I find myself going back to it more and more. But it's certainly not the music I play. You're not going to find me out and about doing Minor Threat or Black Plague covers.
Are you
I,
sure
I had
though?
a What's that?
Are you sure that can't we book you for that?
Oh, I would please, please. I'm anxious for any opportunity to play that music. It's near and dear to me. Um, No, I think it was a combination of I had a really good teacher named Manfred. He owns the old Pipe Lake Schoolhouse, the Pipe Dream Center. And so he got me going at an early age on improvisation and took me down the blues route. And then I started to see the connections between blues and let's say the Led Zeppelin music I was listening to. And then in high school, we had a wonderful music program in Cumberland, still do, and so I had a lot of opportunities to play with the jazz band and solo and ensemble, and so that and eventually honors the state honors jazz band. So because of all those opportunities, those concerts and auditions, that's really what kind of thrust me more into the, we could say, academic realm of music.
It sounds like you got introduced not just to music from a listener standpoint, but from a creator standpoint early on in your life. How would you? And I guess you kind of answered this a little bit, but how would you say that that informs your decisions on what projects you want to be a part of, or what songs that you think are going to be the best crowd pleasers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Certainly grew up with music in the household. Both my parents played trumpet. My sisters and I all played trumpet. And my I think of my dad personally. He was always singing around the house, and he loved the Beatles, he loved the Rolling Stones, so I grew up with those influences. I still kind of have that ongoing debate in my head all the time of who's better, Stones or Beatles, and I go back and forth.
Who is it right
Uh,
now?
oh man, I right at this moment it's the Rolling Stones, and it's a controversial take, but there's a bigger catalog to pull from there. If I put it this way, I had a friend recently tell me that if you had to choose between the two, if you could only have one catalog to listen to, the Stones maybe have a bigger catalog.
And
So,
you don't necessarily think of the Stones as multi genre, but
right.
they do change sound for each era that they've been performing. So it's a big
Yes.
catalog and still very varied while staying true to the Stones sound. Personally, I have that debate amongst myself as well, and I got to see the Stones with my dad. Oh, when was that? 2 years ago, I think now.
Oh wow.
The Black Pumas were opening. Charlie
Nice.
Watts had just passed away. He was supposed to
Okay.
be on that tour, and I think we were like the first or second show without Charlie.
Yep.
And since then, it's been decided that the Stones are where it's at. But I could come back around to the Beatles. I do enjoy the new Beatles song, if you will,
Okay.
the now and then. So that opened up the door for the Beatles to step back in a little bit, but
Sure.
still holding on to the Stones.
Yeah.
Outside of kind of that Led Zeppelin and the Stones and that kind of heavier bluesy sound of the 60s and 70s, where does your inspiration go to from there? Then, if that's kind of the foundation, what came next, or what holds the most dear place in your heart next to that?
Interesting. So I can kind of narrow it down to a few specific bands from my adolescence. Uh, my older sister was a big music head, both my sisters, and she left behind a big CD catalog. So when I really got into music, we'll say sixth grade, probably 10, 11 years old, Sublime was kind of my gateway band. And so because they got me into all the old punk rock that I mentioned, and as well as reggae. I became a big Bob Marley fan and Toots and the Maytals, um, and so they kind of broke things wide open for me. And then the following year, it was the White Stripes put out their Elephant record, and I'd never heard guitar like on Black Math and Ball and a Biscuit, and again, I was seeing this correlation between kind of old blues music that maybe my teacher were bestowing upon me, and I was hearing on like WOJB, and but it was kind of mixed with that punk rock aggression, and there's a real urgency to it. So after that point, I was into anything Jack White was into, from the Stooges to I don't know, Hank Williams and Robert Johnson,
Sure.
and
Well, there
I could keep going and going about this band and that band, but
there's a I was gonna say there's a little bit of a difference between Jack White and was it Hank Williams that you said
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
but still the Hank Williams, and especially Hank Williams Jr., kind of held on to that, or I guess maybe not held on to it, but had that punk rock attitude with their
Yeah.
music and the way that they demanded to be respected and listened to as musicians and artists. Would you
Yep.
say that for you that's kind of what, I might be wording this wrong, but that's kind of what comes first, is the musicianship of the music, the care taken to construct that piece, if you will.
That's an ongoing debate, I guess, in my mind as well. Is that I have a lot of training, and I think I'm kind of hard on myself. Yeah, I take a lot of pride in what I do, so I want things to be precise. At the same time, a lot of the music I've just listed, whether it's blues or punk, isn't always the most precise, cleanly produced music, and I think some of the best art isn't perfect, especially as it pertains to music. So there's kind of an ongoing push and pull there, if you will.
I had
Uh,
a I had a conversation with Nikki Pepper last week, and Sublime had been brought up there as well. And
nice.
w- I do open mics occasionally, and as you know, I'm more of a
Yep,
hip hop artist than anything else. I know about two and a half chords on a guitar, so when
that's
I
all you
do
need.
right, two and a half and the truth, right? Um,
Right.
pardon me, but When I first started doing open mics and knowing that I don't really have much to offer, I clung on to. Have you heard Bradley Noel and Friends acoustic album? Uh,
Yes. Oh yeah.
and that's where I pull a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it inspiration, but it tells me it's okay to get behind the mic right now because that it has a lot of the Sublime songs that you know.
Hmm.
The words are somewhat there on the songs. The instrumentation sometimes matches, but really it sounds like it was the whole album. It sounds like it was recorded at an open mic or some sort
Yep.
of really low key performance where all the mistakes are still there. Sometimes Brad's not even singing the words and
Yep.
mumbling along or shouting this or that, and as much as I love the full studio albums of, well, any band really, when you get sort of, and Beatles have like the outtakes and things too,
Right.
where it's not perfect, and that's almost what makes it perfect is that now you're starting to get into the human of the music, the experience of the art a little bit, and I when I was watching you and Emily and oh, help me here. I hate this.
Valerie.
Valerie,
Valerie.
yes, Valerie. When I was watching you guys, it was all very intricate music, and it was a jazz show, and you know that's known to be a little more precise than Sublime. But when you guys were on stage, that was one of the things that I noticed too about the three of you is that the human experience of the music was there while you were playing. You guys were almost a part of your instruments or a part of the microphone while Val was singing, and it takes a lot of talent to be able to do that both in that more avant-garde style that we were talking about with Sublime and that more academic training
Right.
that you've got. How do you balance the two?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it boils down to time spent playing with one another, and then sort of the repertoire you're pulling from. So that night we had quite a broad mix of we were doing a lot of jazz standards. Val specifically sang a lot of jazz standards, and she did some pop and R&B too, like Roberta Flack and Valerie, the song Valerie. But
And Justin Bieber.
and Justin Bieber, yes. we so some of that music we're reading charts. We have music in front of us, and that's the type of thing that if we played more regularly together, we'd memorize that and maybe have a little more freedom. But just so that we're all on the same page, quite literally, we're looking at the same chord progressions, same melody lines. We're all kind of working as a unit. Um, and so in that sense it's a little rigid, but I guess there's still a lot of improvisation. And then Emily and I get to use a lot of different chord voicings, and we have certain choices we can make, so it's still very spur of the moment. I think it's still very spontaneous, even though we're within the confines of a song form and chord structure, all that stuff.
Now, Third Wind isn't a band that you play out with a lot. In fact, you've got a couple different bands that
Yeah.
you tend to see everywhere. Bare Bones being one of them. You play with Paisan and the Family
Bare
Brass.
minimum.
Bare Minimum being
Yeah.
one of them.
I only say that because Bare Bones is another area group. So
That is true. I'm sorry. I'm
sorry
sorry
to
to
cut you
confuse
off. So,
that. But you do these different projects, and they're usually with different people. Sometimes some of the people are shared between the projects.
mhm.
But how many different styles are you playing in a month, or how many different shows are you playing out? Because it seems that at least every weekend you're playing somewhere else with somebody else.
Yes, absolutely. And there's really no pattern to it. It might be real heavy with a couple bands for a month, and then we might not play for an entire month. And so, as you mentioned, Paisan and the Family Brass, a lot of classic rock and R&B and country. We might play once a month, in the summer, maybe twice a month. Kind of an offshoot of that band is Bare Minimum that you mentioned. Three of the members of Paisan, we do kind of an acoustic thing that's kind of more oldies, more country. That band books a lot more just because it's easier to find venues as a three piece, and just for size and price and a whole variety of factors. So we might play 2, 3, 4 times a month. In the summer, we might be playing twice a week.
Sure.
Um,
So I suppose that kind of varies with the season. What's in demand right now, and
yep.
Like you mentioned with the season, I suppose you get in the warmer months demand for a different sort of sound than you would here in what are supposed to be the cooler months of the year.
Right,
And
right. And oh, I didn't mean to interrupt.
oh, no worries. I was just going to say, I suppose that also has to do with the type of venues because you're not going to be playing outdoors in January or February.
Yes, and you really see the number of venues just kind of explode. I mean, there's 10 times more in the summer just because of those nice outdoor patios and things like that. And what's been really encouraging, hopefully you've been seeing this trend, and I know you've been instrumental in helping this, so thank you, is just that there seems to be more and more of a demand for live music post COVID, I'll say. I'm playing a lot more than I was 4 or 5 years ago, and year round. So normally January, February were pretty lean months where maybe I only played 3, 4 shows, and I'm looking at this week going, man, I have 3, 4 gigs just this week, and a couple at least a couple every week.
Talk a little bit about, if you can, you bring up an interesting point. Obviously, COVID shut everything down. Nobody was booking anywhere, and some folks were doing online performances and things like that.
Yeah.
But now we're seemingly on the other side of that, and live music is. Do you think that that's directly correlated to not being able to have that music, both as artists looking for more unique places to play and listeners just looking for that experience because we didn't get that for so long?
Absolutely. I think it's a combination of both. It's something we all really missed, whether you're a spectator or a performer. It's something we definitely missed for year and a half, 2 years. And I think venues are always looking for a way to separate themselves from their competition and a new way to draw people in. And I think it's a really worthwhile that they found that it really pays off to have live music, and I think there's enough people in this area to support it.
When it comes to venue, you bring up an interesting point here that the number of venues willing to play music kind of explodes in the summer months with the outdoor
Yep.
patios and things of that. But what makes a good venue as a player? I guess we can ask both sides of that. What makes a good venue as a player and as a spectator? I know, like with
Yeah.
our Silver Dollar shows that. Very limited space, and
Mhm.
admittedly, it's kind of hard to find a good spot to view it and hear it because of the size of the space. Either you're up close and you get to see it and it's too loud, or you're in the
Right.
back and it's the perfect volume, but you're not seeing much action. So what makes a good venue on both sides of that, as a player and as a spectator?
Yeah, that's a good question. You bring up a good point about the silver dollar of being kind of a small space, but very intimate. And I really, as a spectator, when I see my favorite artists, I kind of prefer those smaller, intimate environments. So it's always a balance of, there's certain places I played before that were great, but they were tiny. They were the size of my living room, and as a venue, even if you pack the place, it might not be financially sustainable if it's just too small. So you kind of have to find that right balance of big enough and comfortable enough that you can accommodate that many people. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many factors. I think between you want enough space as a performer that you're not cramped, you're not crowded, you feel relaxed, um, and then also acoustics. And that's another reason why the summer months are so welcome, is because outdoor music, we don't have to worry about natural reverb and sound ricocheting off walls and things like that. So, acoustics and space, I think, are probably, for both as a performer, as a spectator, probably the two most important things.
If we can back up just a little bit,
Yeah.
you had mentioned, obviously no shows during COVID. Before COVID, winter months were a little slower, and now you said
Hmm.
you're looking at 3-4 gigs this week alone.
Right.
But before you got to doing 3 to 4 gigs in a week, whether regardless of the calendar month. Uh, how did it start for you? Did it start with at the beginning of our conversation, you'd mentioned kind of the
Mhm.
school bands and kind of academic playing. Did it start there, and then how did you move to doing solo shows and shows with multiple bands?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of it goes back to, like you said, academic. My teacher Manfred was very, very gracious to me at a young age. So about after a year of taking guitar lessons, he invited me to perform with him. The Pipe Dream Center, if you're familiar with it, County Road G, out by Pipe Lake. He puts on free concerts all the time there, and specifically, he had these monthly kind of jam sessions that he would lead. He plays piano, and he invited me to play guitar, and so I was hooked. I mean, I played there at least once a month for basically the next 6 years, all through middle school, high school. And so that I got a taste of performing that way. And then it was probably 2 years after I started lessons. So I'm still an eighth grader, only 12, 13 years old. He got me my first paying job, playing, I think, kind of an informal wedding ceremony or reception, I should say, at someone's home. So he was really instrumental in me seeing that there's a career path here. You can get paid to do this if you possess the right skill set and the right equipment. Um, and it just mushroomed from there. We had a band in high school. Um, Me and Travis Thorpe and Nathan Maltzine and a whole bunch of other people. There was a lot of live music happening in those days, and Battle of the Bands. I remember at Skate City and all over. And
When
uh,
I was talking with a co-host of my podcast, After Hours. His name is Cordell. You've met Cordell. Um,
Mhm.
he's a little bit younger than me, and he was surprised to learn that like between '01, '03 or so, Rice Lake and Cumberland and the surrounding communities, there was a little bit of a thriving punk scene in the
Yeah,
area. And folks were doing shows and kind of, I remember going to the Boys and Girls Club
that's
was
right.
above Amundsen's Appliance in Rice Lake at the
Yeah,
time. And I don't remember all of the bands that played there, but one band, Return to Sender was one, and there was another band called Symphony, and I remember them because they handed out the Hershey Symphony bars during their performance.
nice.
Did you know either of those two bands, Return to Sender or Symphony?
No, I can't say I did, but I remember being there and that when they're still above Amundsen's there, going to a show probably in the eighth grade or so with some of my best friends and just having a ball. I mean, getting in the mosh pit, and I just loved it. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen anything like it. It was very DIY, and it seemed to be all kids. It was all people my age. There were kind of no adults around. It was a lot of fun, and it wasn't about partying or anything like that. It was all about the music and having a good time.
When it comes to booking shows, and you make an interesting point there. That was just kind of all kids there for the music, for the good
Mhm.
time. What and it doesn't just have to be kids, but what is it that makes a not just a performance but an event something that you can get lost in? Something like that where you walk in and it's just magic because you and I both have been
Yeah.
to performances that for one reason or another, and it's always something different with each show that
Mhm.
that just makes it truly a magical experience. What do you know if there or is there can there be a magic formula to create that?
Man, it's hard to conjure, right? I mean, it's hard to create it. I think in a lot of ways it just happens, and it has to do with an energy, without getting too woo woo. When I think of some of I really like a guitar player by the name of Julian Lage, a contemporary. He gets labeled as jazz, but he does a lot of stuff. And I've seen him a number of times. So let's say I saw him at the Stoughton Opera House. Great show, but kind of very quiet and reserved, and everyone's very polite and clapped. And then about a year later, I saw him at the Turf Club in St. Paul, and
Two
more of a
very
bar
different
at
venues.
yeah, exactly, more of a bar atmosphere, and that was just wild. I mean, he took the stage with an urgency and an energy, and it was they were both excellent shows, 10 out of 10, but that one at the Turf Club was entirely different, and you could feel it. I mean, everyone could feel it, and I really I don't know what I mean. I don't know how you conjure that up or how you put your finger on recreating that. It's a tough thing to kind of define. It's really special.
And perhaps it can't be recreated. You hear about music documentaries or the defining moments of the early days of rock and roll or the early days of country, when the outlaw country artists were just getting together, and how
Yep.
magical Nashville used to be, or other places in Texas. And you go now, and there's historical markers, there's remembrances about that, but maybe those moments can't be recreated. We just have to wait for a new one to happen.
Yes, I think that's a great perspective. Absolutely, and kind of being in the moment and moving forward. Um, yeah,
As an artist, how do you? I guess this is a two-part question. How do you recognize that that moment might be happening? Because you never can be sure, right? In the moment, you can't be sure, but you can be aware of previous moments like this. How is a
sure.
Can you, once you realize that the energy is there, can you capture that and sort of lead that energy as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, part of finding that magic is I think finding the right people to play with that you're comfortable with, and playing with them enough to where you establish a chemistry that you can go places and take chances with that group. I played last Friday at the Lakely in Eau Claire with Sue Orfield on tenor saxophone, Will DeBlay on bass, and North Skager on drums, and that's a group that maybe plays, if we're lucky, 3, 4 times a year. We're all
Sure.
busy with other projects. We don't have a name or anything like that yet. But what we all admire about it is that we can take chances. There's a big freedom. We can let things breathe, or we can get really intense. And it's a very dynamic group from loud to soft. And we found that the crowd really responds to that. They really pick up on that. They're in on it. They're in for the ride. And it's just really, really special. And to your point, we can feel it as it's happening. I don't ever go into the gig going, I know it's going to happen necessarily, but at the same time, I have a trust in when I'm playing with that group, and any group, but yeah, I'm just using that as an example because it just happened. But there's a certain trust with the performers, and I think with the audience, that you're either in or you're out.
And so, shifting gears just a little bit, and
Yeah,
I didn't know I was gonna go this direction, but you you seem like a good person to ask. About 10-ish years ago, maybe a little bit more, kind of when Bon Iver was first getting big,
yeah,
Eau Claire was going through a bit of a resurgence. Creatively, artistically, musically, and a lot of big things were starting to happen. And now here we are in 2024. We see the fruits of a lot of the things that started around 2010, 2013. What uh, what would you say has been the biggest change, both in Eau Claire music scene, but also kind of Wisconsin's Great Northwest, if you will, starting in
sure.
Eau Claire, using that as the epicenter, and going out from there? Because you had alluded to it, and I feel it too, that we're starting to see, especially up in this area, that live music has a huge pull, and
Yep.
it's not like the cover bands of when you and I were younger, where it was always Def Leppard and Van Halen, and nothing else ever.
Yep.
I feel like there's something creative that, to me, I don't know if it started in Eau Claire, but it certainly happened in Eau Claire, and it's happening elsewhere in Wisconsin. Are we maybe seeing the beginnings of something bigger?
Yes, I hope so. In some ways, I think it's part of it. I like to think that it was always there, but you know, Bon Iver definitely made it so there was a spotlight on Eau Claire. All of a sudden, it was on the map, right? And and it's really for Rice Lake and the surrounding area. It's the closest kind of large arts community we have, right? Without going to the cities or Duluth. And, I think there's kind of two things at play, and I don't want to veer off in too many paths. There's kind of the artistic side of the songwriter, right, and the creative side, and then there's sort of maybe the more functional cover band that's playing weddings and getting paid, right? And those two don't necessarily jive. They're kind of two different sides of the coin, and I straddle both of those, and I know a lot of artists who also do. And I guess what I'd like to see more of is more of that original music, more creativity, and I think to your point, I think that has grown maybe locally. I think of places like the Potter Shed or Brickyard Pottery, and certain places that really value um, originality over you're just going to come in and play the same CCR songs. Which look, I do that too, and I like doing that. But I think at the end of the day, more and more I'm finding that the spectators, the audience, kind of want something different. They want something new as well, and it's time that we champion that and embrace it.
You allude to something that I've seen more and more online lately in the different musicians Facebook groups that I'm in. It's that battle between cover bands and original bands or
Yep.
original performers. Is there a way? And you might be the perfect person to ask this of. Is there a way that that rivalry, the unspoken rivalry, can cease and those worlds can meld together?
I like to think so, and I'm actually very proud of a lot of the groups I'm in, kind of towing that line and embracing both. I think so. And you asked about kind of my solo performances earlier, and I'd like to think that more and more I'm trying to bring in originals and or at least taking covers and putting my own spin on them. Um, yeah, I think kind of you have to carve out your own lane, right? And you have to find your audience, and you really have to put yourself out there and work at it. And it takes a lot of time, and you just kind of have to trust the process and and go with it. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but
I think you did. I think you did. When it's when you're, let's talk about your original music a
yeah.
little bit. Uh, where do you pull from that? Because you've got so many different projects, different influences that one could guess, try and guess about your original music. But when you sit down and you're creating for yourself, is it truly for yourself, or are you thinking about an audience eventually
Hmm.
too? How it take me into the process?
Interesting question. There's been a lot said about this. I feel like I'm reading Jeff Tweedy's book on songwriting, and I think he touches on that. Um, it, and Rick Rubin, he's the other guy I hear talking about it all the time. Um, I think you have to create it for yourself. I think if you're worried about how it's going to be perceived or if it's going to be liked, I think you're setting yourself up for not necessarily for failure, but I mean, if it's not important to you and if it doesn't come across as authentic and very personal, then I think people can sense that. They can kind of tell that it's phony. So I think it sounds selfish, but I think you kind of have to please yourself first. Um, yeah.
And so when you're creating these songs, I assume then that you're not thinking about how fans of Bare Minimum are going to receive it, how fans of people that saw Third Wind or saw you perform with Sue Orfield, you're just kind of creating this space for Dustin Degoiler.
Yeah, yeah, you're taking all your influences, the things that turn you on, and you're putting them out there. And some of it is I don't have a ton of experience songwriting. It's something I'm kind of getting back to after being dormant for a number of years. And I used to think you had to wait for that divine moment of inspiration where an idea came to you, and more what I'm finding out, certainly from reading Jeff Tweedy's book, is just it's more about the process. It's something you do every day. It's something you make habit, and out of that you get better and better. I mean, because it really is a craft, and it doesn't mean that inspiration doesn't come to you. It's still a very magical, spiritual thing that you're creating something out of nothing. But at the same time, you hone it. You get better and better at coming up with ideas, whether they're musical or lyrical.
So if we take all of your inspirations going back to the early punk days, to
Right.
the academic, to the jazz, to all of this, how best do you describe the Dustin DeGoyer original sound?
Ooh, wow, that's interesting. I think
Are these original songs punk rock?
no, they're not. I'd like to sneak a couple in there. I think I did like kind of a Pixies rip-off song once a while back, but I couldn't even remember it. I couldn't play it for you now. Um, I think I've been compared. and I'll take this comparison to Elliott Smith a time or two, just that he kind of took that Beatles song crafting, intricate chords and melodies, and maybe married them with some dark, very personal lyrics. So I think some of the originals kind of are on that side of things.
I have to
The-
say that Elliott Smith is one of my all-time favorite singer-songwriters.
yes, me
Uh,
too.
I was introduced to him on accident, actually. Do you know Andy Nelson by chance? Rice Lake native, plays Eau Claire area.
I can't say I do. No.
We were doing open mics together 15ish years ago or so, and he would play Son of Sam, and he
Okay.
played it so well.
Mhm.
And I always thought that that was an Andy Nelson original. Uh, Turns out it's not.
Right.
And when I discovered, I forget the name of the album, but when I discovered that album, from start to
Yeah.
finish, there's not a song that I skip on it. It's
No.
That's it.
Figure eight, I
Yes, figure
believe.
eight. I
Yeah.
was gonna
Yeah.
say I can picture it, and that
Yep.
eight ball was right there. So yeah, figure eight, and it's that's such a glorious album. And so, would you say that you pull inspiration then from Elliott Smith while you're crafting, or is that just your sound happens to, because of your influences, happens to fall next to that genre?
I think both. Yeah, I never have in my mind that I want this to sound like someone specifically, but you pull from what you know, and that's his discography definitely takes up a big part of my hard drive. So, yeah.
What would you say is just for the fun of it? What would you say is your favorite Elliott Smith song?
Oh wow. Oh, now I got to think for a second.
Caught you off guard.
Um, yeah, some of those early songs are really really intimate, and you can kind of tell they're done on like a 4-track recorder, like Needle in the Hay, Clementine. But I also like kind of the more developed songs like Stupidity Tries off of Figure Eight. Is That's kind of more of a Beatlesque big arrangement with strings, and oh man.
I have to ask because you mentioned Elliott's earlier songs that were recorded
Mhm.
a little differently. Do you know and do you listen to the Mountain Goats?
I don't. I know of them, but it's not a band I know well. I may have heard them kind of in passing, but
I I wouldn't compare them to Elliott Smith. They don't fall in the same genre, but it's really acoustic guitar based, and kind of lyrically, not kind of, very much so leans dark in the lyrical content,
Mhm.
but got their start with just cassette recordings and sent them out, and if you listen to the early stuff, you still have that tape hiss in it, and it sounds
Yep.
like they just pressed record in their living room, and away it went. And I think that's part of the magic of some of those recordings
Yes.
is that.
Agreed. I think things can get over polished, and I still find myself going back to sort of that lo-fi music, and you alluded to it earlier with Bradley Noel and Friends, that acoustic record. And I think part of the reason I liked Sublime so much starting out is that it really felt like I could do this. This really
Yes.
sounds like something I could do, because like you said, they're just hitting record on a tape recorder. I used to make recordings on my Talk Boy back in those days.
Do you still got it?
I have the Talk Boy. I don't know that it's functional, but I couldn't part with it. So
Right, it is a sentimental piece.
that's right.
Well, Dustin, I want to thank you for taking time to chat with us here this morning on Dirty Chai Radio. We have a little bit of your performance from last April with Third Wind with Emily and Val, and so we'll play the first song here on Dirty Chai Radio, also the Live 365 Radio app, and we'll continue it for this for the YouTube and Facebook stream as well. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Dustin.
Likewise, Ryan, it was a pleasure. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Silver Dollar Saloon. For some of you, this might be your first time being down here. For others, it's revisiting years past, and we're thankful to have each and every one of you here for the night. We've never done jazz in the Silver Dollar before, so personally, I'm a huge jazz fan, so I'm excited for the night. I hope you are too. I'm also your bartender, so if it's a little slow, I apologize. I'll be right with you as soon as I can. We're also running sound, and let me tell you how honored I am to have such three great, talented musicians here in the Silver Dollar. They go by the name of Third Wind tonight. You can find more information at dirtychairadio.com. We've linked back to their links, and so if you wanted to find more information, each one of these artists here, very talented together, but also very talented on their own. So if you wanted to find shows and support the music wherever they go, it's worth following wherever they're on. Also, tonight's program is or performance is being recorded, both audio and visually. So if you like what you hear, visit dirtychairadio.com after sometime in the coming week, and you may be able to listen back to the performance from tonight. So without further ado, I will step out of the way and we'll let the music speak for itself. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, yeah. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me speaking? Hopefully. I'm a quiet speaker, so if I'm mumbling, just yell at me. Okay, we're going to start off with a little There Will Never Be Another You.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like this, and I'll be standing here with someone new. There will be other songs to sing, another fall, another spring, but there will never be another you. There will be other lips that I may kiss, but they won't thrill me like yours used to do. Yes, I may dream a million dreams, but how can they come true if there will never ever be another you? to sing another fall, another spring, but there will never be another you. The ruby lips that I may kiss